Hi, and welcome back. In this episode, we'll be discussing the intricacies of time travel. Like I said last time, I'm going to be looking at time travel theory itself and how it works narratively speaking, then discuss some films that fall into this category. So today, I'll be discussing one of the simpler theories out there. Well, simple one compared to some other theories. So let's focus on some linear and double linear travel. Now, linear travel is pretty simple. Seriously, it's just traveling backwards or forwards in time once, then most of the time returning home. That's it. Told you it was simple. Like I said, a character is sent to a different point in time. Mostly it's to the distant past or the character's own personal history. From there, the protagonist must fix one event and then return home, and finds that changing past events completely changes the original timeline into a much better one. For this time travel talks, I'll be explaining and guiding my examples of how this can be used narratively speaking, in the form of diagrams. Because this narrative technique is relatively simple, more time is spent on the character themselves than the mystery of time travel. So whatever method or reason for traveling through time is not as important as the character getting back home safely. And so this theory is used often in the romantic comedy genres of time travel, with the protagonist wishing to go back and repeat the last year or fix some of their mistakes. Suddenly, they just find themselves back and repeat the whole things over again. My, isn't that convenient? Films such as Peggy Sue Got Married, Kate and Leopold, Time Riders, The Adventures of Lynn Swan, and Hot Tub Time Machine. These films and others fit into the single linear time travel category where things work out for the better. This theory can also be used in sci-fi focused films, my personal favorite being Back to the Future. In 1985, Marty McFly finds that his friend and mad scientist Doc has invented a time machine, but the Doc dies and Marty uses the machine to escape to 1955. Then, after accidentally meeting his then young parents, he finds that he undid their first meeting and destroyed the possibility of them getting married, almost erasing himself from history. One adventure later, with a sprinkle of Oedipus complex on the side, Marty fixes his parents and saves Doc. When he returns to 1985, he finds his parents are still together and living a much better life from now on. So, as you can see, linear travel allows for one trip through time, fix one event, and return to a happy ending. Now, if you thought this was going to be easy, then you clearly forgotten we're talking about time travel here, because sometimes the timeline is like, psych, and pulls a 180 on the characters, showing that when they mess with time, it actually makes the whole timeline much, much worse. This is known as double linear travel. In this version, once the character returns home, they find that changing events in the past leads to unforeseen consequences in the present, such as their personal lives being great, but everyone else they knew is now terrible. So then the traveler must go back in time once again in an attempt to fix it. Now this can be achieved by creating a new event and thus creating a new timeline with a brand new outcome. However, this could lead to an even worse timeline than before, or reverting to the original timeline by stopping any interference in the first place. But this leads to returning to the original timeline of events as if nothing ever happened at all. An example of this would be Back to the Future 2. Yes, I'm gonna keep talking about it, and no one can stop me. After wrapping up on the last adventure, Doc and Marty run an errand in the far-off distant future of 2015. Meanwhile, Old Man Biff in that era steals the time machine and gives his younger self back in 1955 a sports almanac. Marty and Doc return to 1985 and finds a completely different dystopia. So now they must go back to 1955, again, to stop Biff, again, and fix the timeline, again. Then, after all this double traveling, they finally return to the original timeline. Well, actually there's a whole other cowboy side adventure, but you're forgiven if you forget about that part. Other films such as When We First Met, Sounds of Thunder, Thrill Seekers all focus on double traveling and messing up the original timeline, with the protagonist attempting to change things once more. After all this efforts and struggle the character puts into changing the timeline, then changing it back, the traveler usually ends up back where they started, with no change being made to the world around them, just personal growth. They move on with new hopes and acceptance in their hearts, or trauma and fear depending on what they saw. I guess you could say they would think twice about it. But in all seriousness, despite these two types of time travels, especially the second one focusing heavily on the cautionary tale approach, in that time travel is dangerous and leads to unforeseen consequences in the future or present, and a simple mistake could end your very existence, much like how a single mistake on this software could delete every